welcome back to our last video on creating the controller. Right now what we need to do, so at this point you should have your controller face cut out and all the components assembled on it. Mine's currently wired, yours shouldn't be. So if you haven't wired yours yet, don't worry, you're not supposed to have yet. I jumped ahead. All right, now what we need to do is we need to cut the hole. So here's a base I've already created, and I cut a hole for the RJ45 connector for this one. And then also one for the Arduino's USB cable. That way we can upload programs to it easily. And you can see how it fits in. You tip it at an angle, and then you get this RJ45 connector in there. And then because I cut a slot all the way to the top over here, the USB connector for the Arduino can just slide kind of right in without having to fit into a hole. So one of them will create a hole. For the RJ45 will create a hole. And for the USB upload cable for the Arduino, we'll cut a slot all the way to the top. Okay. To do that, we've got to get some measurements. Your measurements are different than mine, so make sure you're taking yours. I'll give you some techniques on what I found was easy. So if I look at my model here, I need to locate the position of this RJ45 connector first. So to do that, I have to measure from some known point on here. And when I look at my model on the screen, I can see where this little curve stops right here might be a good measuring point. Which might be an argument for not putting a curve there, so you'd have a hard point, but I didn't. I have a little curve there. So what I'm going to do is take a pencil and just eyeball on here and try and find where that curve ends and make a pencil mark on it. So you can see I just made a pencil mark right there where this curve just barely ends. Now it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be close enough. And the reason I put a pencil mark on that is so that later when I'm taking all my measurements, I'm having somewhere like really precise to start from instead of trying to guess where I'm starting and ending from. And from there, I'm going to measure two things. I'm going to measure the distance from that pencil mark to the front or the near side of the RJ45 connector. And then I'm going to subtract from that number. I'm going to try and measure this perfectly as I can. Let me turn it on first. I'm going to subtract 1 millimeter from that. That'll make the opening a little bit, that'll make the opening start a little sooner than it has to. I don't want to try and make that hole perfect because then it has to be perfectly positioned. Then from that same mark, I'm going to measure over to the outside edge on the other side of the RJ45 connector. And on this one, I'm going to add an extra millimeter, so the opening ends a little after where it should. So that would make it 2 millimeters extra wide to give me some wiggle room. And then I'm going to measure from the bottom of the face to the bottom of the RJ45, something like that. And again, here I'm going to subtract a millimeter to make that hole start sooner than it's supposed to. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but measure to the top of the RJ45 like that. And I'm going to add a millimeter to that one, so it's a little bit higher than, or lower, whatever you want to think about it, a little bit bigger than it needs to be. So the near side, you subtract 1. The far side, you add 1 millimeter, and that'll help you kind of get an opening that works. All right, same thing on this other side. I'll make a mark on this one. I made a mark on this side, and I'm going to measure over to the front near side, subtract a millimeter, over to the far side, add a millimeter, and then I'm just going to measure from the face down to the top here. I don't need to the bottom because I'm going to cut a slot here and not a hole. I'm going to do that with, I'm going to add a millimeter to this top measurement. Okay, hopefully that was helpful and wasn't a waste of your time. So I'm going to do my measurements and then I'll come back and show you how I cut the holes. Okay, so I have my measurements and I know kind of how I'm going to approach it. The one thing you have to keep track of is your controller right now is like this, so make sure you're thinking left, right in terms of looking at it like this. So for me, I've marked this edge here. So I'm actually going to measure this from this edge on this side. So that 3D thinking is something, just check it out, make sure you're in the right space. All right, so I'm going to hide the faceplate. I don't need that for now. And I'm going to create a sketch right here on this. And when I look at it, yep, I measured from this side. So all my measurements for me are from this corner over. So I'm just going to grab a quick rectangle and drop it in here. I'm not going to do any dimensions for it yet. I'll add those in just a second. I'm going to hit dimensioning. And I found from this edge to this edge, for the near side, that was 20 millimeters. It was actually more like 21. I subtracted 1 from it. And then from the far side, from this edge to this edge, is 38. It was actually about 37, so I added a millimeter to that one to make it a little wider than it was supposed to. And then from the top edge to here was 12. Again, that's 1 millimeter less. It was actually 13. I subtracted a millimeter from that one. And then here, from the bottom to that top face, was for me 28. Again, that was actually 27. I added an inch there. So that's the opening for the RJ45, hopefully. So I'm going to extrude this. Yep, that looks good. And I'm going to extrude it back. This is where you have an opportunity now to look. I'm going to flip the model over. I'm going to actually extrude to a distance, to an object. And I'm going to extrude right here to the back face so it extrudes perfectly there, not over extruding anything. This is where you should take a look at it and see. So like mine, for example, is a little bit off to the right-hand side when I'm looking at it. And when I look at this, yep, it's off to the right-hand side a little bit. So I think I've got the orientation right. This is where you can check to make sure that it's not weird looking. Or you put it like to the left when it's supposed to be to the right. Whatever. You'll figure it out. And then the last thing I want to do is add the connector. So I'm going to go back to the home view. And so right now it looks like this. So there's my RJ45 in that direction. So for me, my Arduino's on this side. So I'm going to create a sketch on this face here. And check, I measured from this left-hand end of the corner here. So I'm going to just add another rectangle in here. This one I'm going to start at the top because I know I'm going to cut all the way to the top and put it here. Again, no dimensions. Hit D for dimensioning. From this edge to the near side, I measured mine to be 33. And of course, you shouldn't be using mine. Yours will be different. And then, and again, that one I subtracted 1 from, so it was really 34 when I measured it. And then to this back side, I measured it at 46.5, so I'm going to use 47.5. And that adds 1 millimeter to make it a little bit wider. And then from this edge down to the bottom, I measured that at 16, so I added 1 to 17. And that's my slot. I'm going to hit E for extrude, click here, and then drag it back this way. I'm going to do a distance to object, and I'm going to click on this inside face of the wall so it extrudes perfectly the right distance. Click OK. Perfect. Looks like I have a sketch on it. This is blue like haze over it. That usually means you have a sketch left. Oh, I do right there, sketch 19. All right, so that's it. That's my final thing. One last thing we can do kind of for fun is if we flip it over, click on the bottom view. I'm going to flip it so that it's right side up. We can add an engraving down here and emboss. We can emboss some text. So to do that, we're going to create a quick sketch on the bottom face. And then we're going to go here to the Create menu and use text. I'm going to start right in the corner here and just drag a text box across. This will help you align everything. And I'm going to choose middle and middle. You can do it wherever you like. And then here I'm going to do KHS Engineering and Robotics. Not liking how that looks. Oh, that's better. Does it change anything? Maybe that goes better. Oh, I like that better. Okay. And maybe I'll do that. Nah. And then we can increase the size of the text. So take it up to 15 millimeters. Ooh, that looks nice. And we can change the font type as well. Now you'll find if you play around with the font types that some fonts do not emboss. They cause errors, and usually it's the really fancy ones that are problematic. So, I don't like that one very much. But you can find one that keeps it fairly simple. That looks kind of cool. See if that one works okay. And then I'm just going to use E for extrude. Remove the profile that's selected. I'm just going to select the letters instead. And I'm going to do this when I print on the printer, I'm going to use a 0.3 layer height. So I'm going to do 3 layers in. So I'm going to emboss it 0.9 millimeters. So here, distance, and my guess is going to be negative 0.9. Awesome, and enter. Give it a second to catch up, and there it is. So I've got this embossed letters there. They'll print out really cool looking. All right, so that's it. Go ahead and 3D print this. While this is printing, don't wait for it. Move on to wiring the controller so you can get all those crazy wires done. And then from there, you'll assemble it, and everything will be good. Great time.